right, welcome in, everybody. We're diving deep today
Going deep.
into Joe Rogan's interview with Woody Harrelson.
Always a good time.
Yeah, this one is jam-packed. Buckle up.
So many topics. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the obvious starting point is that SNL monologue, right?
Oh, yeah. The one that caused all that commotion.
Harrelson basically paints this picture of, big drug cartels making everybody stay home.
And take their drugs, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of folks labeled him.
Anti-vaxxer.
Right, but listening to him with Rogan.
It's more nuanced, you know?
Oh, definitely.
It's not that he's against vaccines. It's more like he's
questioning the whole.
the ethics of it all.
Yeah, like companies, Pfizer specifically.
As they're making bank off of a global pandemic?
Right, and that whole idea of like profiteering during a war on microbes.
That's what gets him, yeah.
It really rubs him the wrong way.
And, you know, it's funny.
What's that?
He actually compares it to
What?
Nixon, Richard Nixon.
Oh, wow.
Possibly sabotaging peace talks in Vietnam
Seriously?
just to win an election. Crazy,
Yeah,
right?
it's a heck of a comparison.
And he mentions this phone call between Nixon and President Johnson,
Uh-huh.
where Johnson basically accuses Nixon of doing exactly that.
Whoa, that's, I mean,
Pretty chilling.
yeah, a chilling historical parallel for sure.
Makes you think, right?
It really does.
Can profit motives really influence even the most critical decisions?
I mean, that seems to be at the heart of what Harrelson is getting at.
Yeah, this deep distrust.
And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
He brought this up, this whole idea.
With Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, specifically about that October surprise conspiracy theory.
You know that whole thing with the
With Reagan campaign.
allegedly striking a deal to delay the release of hostages in Iran.
Until after the election.
Exactly.
Wow, so he straight up asked Kroner about that.
He did. And according to Harrelson,
Mm-hmm.
Carter confirmed that people inside the Reagan administration,
Oh.
yeah, they corroborated the theory.
That's wild. So Harrelson sees a connection between.
Between that kind of historical political maneuvering
Yeah.
and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, yeah.
He and Rogan, they're
Pretty skeptical of the mandates.
They are. They even go so far as to draw parallels to fascism.
Wow.
They see it as government overreach,
Right.
lack of trust in institutions like, you know,
Big Pharma.
Big Pharma. Exactly.
Definitely major concerns for them.
And it's not just about the mandates.
What else then?
The way information was controlled during the pandemic,
Okay.
they talk about this thing called the Trusted News Initiative.
So for folks who might not be familiar.
Right.
It was basically this.
Collaboration between governments and social media companies.
To what? Control what information?
Yeah, to like control what was considered reliable information.
That's tricky territory.
It is. But what I found interesting is Rogan actually breaks down.
Breaks down the terminology. Yeah. Yeah, like misinformation, disinformation,
Yeah.
and malinformation.
It's important to distinguish.
It is. Because
One's intentionally false.
one's accidentally false.
And then one's actually true, but shared to cause harm.
That one, malinformation. I never thought about it like that.
It's like truth can be weaponized, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And so it makes you wonder, like,
Who decides?
who decides what's true or harmful?
Well, what happens when those in power
Censor things that maybe later turn out to be.
accurate?
Which brings us to another controversial figure.
Dr. Robert Malone
Oh, yeah, Rogan's interview with him.
caused quite a stir.
Huge backlash. Malone was very critical
Super critical.
of the mRNA vaccines.
And of course,
Harrelson backs both Rogan and Malone.
he does.
He even says a lot of what Malone predicted has come true.
Like what specifically?
Well, he mentions this Yale study,
Oh, right. The one about the
spike protein.
spike proteins. That was big.
Yeah, you know, a key component of the vaccines being found in the body for like
Over 700 days.
700 plus days after injection.
Which, I mean, that goes against
What a lot of people initially thought.
completely. The thinking was they degrade quickly.
It really underscores how much we're still learning.
About COVID, about the vaccines.
But the whole thing, really.
And the need for, well,
Open discussion?
yeah, continued research, open discussions.
Couldn't agree more.
It's a complex issue
And it feeds into, I think, their larger distrust.
of the mainstream media.
Yeah, they really see it as
Pushing division,
influenced by special interests,
the whole 9 yards.
which is interesting because they contrast that with,
What they see as this rise of independent journalism.
yeah, particularly on platforms like
Like X, formerly Twitter,
where you get, you know,
alternative viewpoints,
just in journalism.
community-based fact-checking
It's a whole different,
landscape.
it is, and they seem
Optimistic.
about that model.
Yeah, it's like They see it as this...
Counterbalance, yeah.
And the perceived bias.
In mainstream media.
They're definitely advocating for critical thinking.
Media literacy. Big time.
In this new information landscape.
And that's really just scratching the surface.
Oh, we've got a lot more to unpack here.
So much more to dive into.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up, everybody.
We're going deep.
And it's interesting how they tie this whole distrust thing into...
this theme of profiteering.
Yeah, they see it everywhere.
Everywhere.
War, healthcare.
Even Girl Scout cookies. Can you believe that?
No kidding. And they have this...
It's kind of crude, but this phrase they keep using, follow that fucking cheese.
And it really highlights how...
a desire for profit, right?
Yeah.
How it can lead to some...
messed up stuff.
seriously messed up outcomes.
Makes you think, right? What about you, listener?
Yeah, have you ever seen this following the cheese thing?
Cause problems in your own life.
It's a good question.
Definitely something to ponder.
And it's not always about,
Individuals being greedy.
right. There's
Systemic issues at play, too. Oh, for sure.
It's the way systems are structured.
The incentives, yeah.
Sometimes those incentives just prioritize.
Profit over people.
Sadly. Yeah.
So it's not enough to just point fingers.
They're the bad guys.
We got to look at the bigger picture.
The whole system.
It's heavy stuff, but then...
they shift gears a bit.
they do?
To something a bit more...
hopeful.
yeah, psychedelics.
Oh, yeah. They're
They believe it's essential.
to foster, like
passion,
passion.
And Harrelson, he tells this great story.
Oh, yeah, about running into...
guy.
who he just thought was a total...
jerk, basically.
but then he just...
Smiles at the guy.
and it totally changes the whole interaction.
It's such a simple thing.
But it's powerful, you know?
It really shows how...
even a small gesture.
can make a big difference.
And then Rogan, well, he takes it a step further.
With his suggestion about...
putting acid in the congressional punch bowl.
he's not serious, obviously.
No, but it's funny. It is.
But also kind of highlights...
this need for a...
radical shift.
in perspective, yeah.
Especially for those in power.
It's like they think psychedelics could help us
Break down those barriers.
see the world through a different lens.
Empathy. Interconnectedness.
All the good stuff.
Now, they're not naive. They know.
There are challenges,
Practical, ethical.
but the core idea is,
We gotta find common ground.
and maybe, just maybe,
Psychedelics could help with that.
it's a conversation starter for sure.
No doubt.
It makes you think about
The role psychedelics could play in society.
how we balance individual freedom.
With the risks.
It's a tricky one.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
We got to circle back.
to this other interesting topic,
The changing media landscape
what'd you make of their take on independent journalism?
and platforms like X. It's like they're cautiously optimistic, right?
Yeah, about this rise of independent media,
As a way to counter.
that perceived bias in the mainstream.
Exactly. And they talk about how
It could lead to
more diverse viewpoints.
citizen journalism, all
It's almost like they envision
more decentralized media landscape,
where people can
Fact check for themselves.
challenge narratives,
That don't ring true.
which kind of brings us back to,
That whole following the cheese idea,
right, it's about being,
more critical consumers of information.
asking the tough questions like,
Who benefits from this story?
yeah, who's making money off this?
Exactly. Understanding the financial incentives.
Helps us understand why.
Certain narratives are pushed.
Or suppressed.
It's all connected.
So it's about being media savvy, I guess.
Tracing the flow of money and power.
They're definitely,
Skeptical.
yeah, of those in power.
Whether it's government or corporations.
But amidst all that,
There's a glimmer of hope.
yeah, they talk about the power of
Psychedelics.
to cultivate,
compact,
break down those tribal barriers.
and connect with our shared humanity.
Rogan even jokes about.
Spiking the congressional punch bowl with acid.
Obviously not a serious suggestion.
But it's a powerful image, right?
It is. It speaks to that desire
A
for
real shift in consciousness.
a fundamental change in
we think.
how we interact with the world.
And with each other.
So big picture, what can we take away from all this?
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is, but I think the key takeaway is
Critical thinking.
questioning assumptions.
Seeking out diverse perspectives.
Rogan and Harrelson might not have all the answers.
But they're asking the right questions.
They're pushing us to be more aware,
The forces at play.
both good and bad,
More discerning about the information we consume.
and the choices we make.
Ultimately, it's about remembering.
That even amidst the chaos,
There's always hope.
hope for a more
Compassionate
Yeah.
and enlightened future.
well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive
into Joe Rogan's interview with Woody Harrelson.
We hope it sparked some new ideas
and challenged your thinking a bit.
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Take these insights with you.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And thanks for listening.